this video, I'm going to cover everything that went into making the concrete section of this Concrete and Alder Entertainment Center. If you have any questions about the build, leave those in the comments section. If you're looking for the wood section and the assembly of the whole piece, that's going to be in a separate video so that I kept it below 25 minutes or so. Anytime I'm making a piece and I have the opportunity to use a spacer block, or in this particular case where I'm using you can just use a level, a straight edge, or something like that. Anytime I'm using pocket holes, I try to use something along those lines because it always shifts. So it's a really good resource to use when you want something to stay in one place, but there's a good chance that it might move when you're connecting it. So you basically have three different ways to join melamine pieces together. The most common one is going to be screws. So a bigger piece like this, using screws is going to give you a much better connection, much stronger connection than, say, nails or staples. Because I needed to combine two pieces of melamine because this piece wasn't long enough to get me the full span, doing this you can kind of sand down where the two pieces meet. There's a bunch of different ways where you can combine them, but using this vinyl over it allows you to get a little bit more of a consistent texture across the whole piece. It also helps get rid of that seam between the two pieces. This part is pretty common. You just get all your corners and wherever you're going to put silicone, wax those real good.
It's really black. Mm-hmm. It's really black. I know what black is.
Do you know what black is?
Mm-hmm. I do. But I don't know what black is. This is city black.
If you do decide to silicone your molds, you do want to make sure that you use 100% silicone. The color doesn't particularly matter. One thing that you will want to do is pick a color that is different from your melamine. It sounds like a little bit of a trivial thing, but it's harder to see the squeeze out if you use white silicone on the white melamine. The opposite is also true if you use black melamine with black silicone. It's not as big of it's not as similar as white on white for some reason. I think it has to do with the sheen, but you'll definitely want to make sure that if possible you use a different color. These next couple of parts are going to be very highly dependent on what style or what finish you pick for your piece. Because I was pouring part of mine and this kind of had to be assembled as I went, that kind of dictated how I was going to make the piece. You can see that this piece that I'm sliding in right now is the knockout for the base. In that is a section to hold this rod that's going to be tensioned after everything is disassembled and processed. To cut down on weight, I went ahead and added in another knockout here. If you're laying all of your backer up by hand, you can get away with not having something like that, but I was just wanting to pour it. That's the style that I went through. This section right here is where I'm pushing this down with a piece of PVC. That is not to compact the layers. That was only to scrape some concrete off the side of that form. It was kind of just to clean up the form. If you have a different style and you're trying to get your layers to blend, then you would do that, but a little bit more aggressively. From there, once I get to the end, you're basically just filling up your mold with, again, this is going to be dependent on whatever style you go with. Different finishes will require different application methods at this point, but if you have an inside mold like this, you'll probably end up just pouring the rest of your backer in to get everything set how you want it. Because this finish was all fully poured, I left all my backs high so that when I went and grind them down flat, that I would have not as many bug holes or bumps or voids or anything. This part's not it doesn't have to be perfectly flat because this piece is so heavy. It's going to condense the wood legs enough where I'm not that concerned. So you don't really have to worry about too much of that being perfectly flat, but you want to get it close. Depending on your mix design, you may need to leave it in the mold longer than I did. This can range anywhere from a day to a couple of days. That's going to depend on your mix design. It's going to depend on your shop environment. But you will want to be careful and some people complain that, oh, you shouldn't rest the pry bar against this. This particular finish has to be processed several times. So even if there is a little bit of a dent or a dimple or anything like that from the pry bar, it's not that big of a deal because of how much processing and how of a rustic look this has. From here, we basically just go through and take out all the foam blocks for the different joineries that are in this piece. This piece has two legs that are going to interconnect with the top. It's not an actual, it may be an actual woodworking joint. I've never seen one, but this was designed specifically to have enough wood there so that the wood wasn't weak and enough concrete there to when the wood part goes underneath it that it sits on it. There's a big enough shelf to set everything on. He says a pretty involved joint, if you will. So far, it's worked out really well. You could probably get away with a less involved joint, but that's just kind of what I went with for this project. This part right here is the section for the stringers, the base shelf to kind of connect into. This all thread right here was because I don't have any other piece that's kind of locking the base in from sliding like left to right, a hole will be drilled in the wood, and then that will sit inside of it to keep it from rocking out while it's being moved. Once it's set in place, it'll never be a problem. This is the first processing of going through on this piece. It ranges everything from starting with 100 grit diamonds to 200, and then hand pads on the edges, kind of rounding those over, kind of getting the look that I want. Again, this part will be dictated quite a bit by what you pick as a finish. In my shop, I use seal hair. You can use pretty much whatever you want. Just make sure that whatever the application of your piece is, that it's applicable for the sealer that you pick. I did go ahead and go with prime hair on this one. It keeps the color from enhancing too much. I knew exactly what color I wanted, and I really wanted to make sure that I got a nice subdued color. The color blocker or prime hair really helps with that. This is something that I learned from some of the guys in the forums, is using this tape to get all the extra fuzzies off of these rollers. I wish more people talked about it, because in the forums it's pretty common, but it was actually kind of hard to find out in even the YouTube universe. I'm not going to go into too much detail here on how to apply the primer and the final sealer. Main reason is because Cody is the maker distributor. I'm not really sure the correct term, but he's got a whole bunch of videos up on the Facebook forums. So if you're interested in using the sealer, I would really recommend checking out there, because he's going to have a much better set of tutorials and how to actually go through about and doing this. Now, the big difference between what I was applying and what I'm applying right now is this is the actual sealer. This is a solvent-based sealer, and if you decide to go with this, you absolutely need to make sure that you wear a respirator with this. The fumes that this puts off you don't want to be breathing this stuff in. With this sealer, pairing the accelerator with infrared heat is really going to kickstart that sealer. You'll have a really nice hard sealer the next day. Thanks for everyone who's made it this far. If you have any questions about the piece or any general questions, leave those down in the YouTube comment section, and I'll try and get back to you with as accurate and prompt as a response as I can. Thanks again, everyone, and I really appreciate your time.